32. Entrepreneur and vendor. Entrepreneur.
People whose parents were self-employed are more likely to become entrepreneurs.
Enterprise.
People began to pay for leisure activities organized by capitalist enterprises.
Vendor.
The vendor rolled up a waffle and put ice cream on top, creating the world's first ice cream cone.
Perspective.
From an economic perspective, a short-lived event can become an innovative event if it generates goods and services that can be sold to people.
Innovation.
Competition makes the world go round. It prompts innovation, drives global markets, and puts money in the pocket.
Innovative.
The engineer took an innovative approach to producing cars.
Prospect.
We borrow environmental capital from future generations with no prospect of repaying.
Prospective.
Faced with a prospective new home, one of the first questions people ask is, how much natural light is there? A prospective buyer is someone who is likely to buy the good or service.
Incentive.
In the 19th century, an incentive was offered for finding dinosaur bones.
Unwarranted.
Any other breaks in the midst of ongoing work hours are unwarranted.
Warrant.
There is no warrant for criticizing the entrepreneur without any evidence. Further criticism against the entrepreneur is not warranted.
Vocation.
Studying history can lead to all sorts of brilliant vocations and careers.
Inventory.
The merchant reduced inventory to balance supply and demand. The entrepreneur made an inventory of everything before ordering new goods.
Patent.
The extension of patent laws created a growing market for private seed companies.
Burnout.
To fight productivity-slowing burnout, they introduced a new method for ensuring that their employees should go home on time and rest.
Patron.
Wealthy patrons supported artists to continue their works.
Patronage.
If the great Renaissance artists like Michelangelo had been born only 50 years before they were, the culture of artistic patronage would not have been in place to fund their great achievements.
Stake.
A lot is at stake in such words as caring, friend, and conversation.
Abandon.
Although an investment may be falling in price, it doesn't mean you have to abandon it in a rush.
Intrude.
I don't want you to intrude into my private life.
Intruder.
The ant colony that explores more widely for food tends to respond more aggressively to intruders.
Intrusion.
The glass buildings can be the engineering answer to these conflicting desires, to be at once sheltered from the wind, the cold, and the rain, to be secure from intrusion and thieves, but not to live in darkness.
Discharge. Discharge.
Control over direct discharge of chemicals from industrial operations is needed.
Retire.
A worker wanted to retire to live a more leisurely life with his family.
Pension.
Millions of workers who retired with pensions during the 1960s found that inflation pushed up costs far beyond their expected expenses.
Utility.
When the cold winter drives up demand for natural gas, you can see this in your utility bill.
Surveillance.
The technology is likely to be used by governments and companies that transform it into a powerful tool for surveillance and control.
Conviction.
As time passed, his commitment and passion seemed to fade gradually. Then he recalled his former strong conviction.
Convict. Convict.
He was convicted of murder and spent the rest of life in prison as a convict.
Make amends for.
Two brothers were convicted of stealing sheep. One of them chose to stay in the village and try to make amends for his offenses.
Amend.
The government amended the law to include women and the poor.
Exploit.
Employers will be able to exploit workers without the law.
Exploitation.
76% of the world's fisheries have recently suffered from thoughtless exploitation and overfishing.
Mortal.
All men are mortal.
Mortality.
The physicians were provided with the information about surgery outcomes. There was a 10% mortality rate in the first month.
Immortality.
The great poets hoped that poetic greatness would grant them a kind of earthly immortality.
Longevity.
My father just didn't have the longevity that I hoped.